back to Goat Quest. I am beerless today. The beer man is in Los Angeles. He's out on the left coast with the LA Kings and his significant other, the only female player to ever play in an NHL-sanctioned game, Mano Rayom. And the LA Kings are playoff bound out there, unlike your Detroit Red Wings, who are still in the hunt, but they are struggling. And it is an arduous path in the final weeks to see the Red Wings break this 8-year streak now, as they are the last team standing in the NHL that has not made it to the Stanley Cup playoffs. But we'll get into that a little bit more. It has been a phenomenal week in sports. We're coming off of the NCAA National Championship, the Final Four. The March Madness came to a close last night with the Florida Gators edging out Calvin Sampson and his heartbroken Houston Cougars. A hell of a game. We'll get deep into that. We had the Women's Championship, another epic conclusion there. As I mentioned, the Red Wings and the Pistons are both fighting for playoff contention. The Pistons are in, but where will they land in the placement? And who will they end up playing? There's some interesting strategy behind that we'll get into. The Great one of the records that many people thought would never be broken, the Great One's goal record. We'll get into that. And then just the overall layout of what the playoffs look like in the NBA and in the NHL as we careen towards our finale episode here for the season on Goat Quest before we take a hiatus in the spring into the summer, where we will come back to you for the football season, and we will come back to you at Michigan International Speedway, where we'll be interviewing Chris Bell, the hottest driver in NASCAR, in June of 2025. So a lot to get into. I'm flying solo, so you'll have to bear with me with no beer man assisting. But opening day is the Tiger Stadium tradition that many of us know and love and have been a part of for most of our lives. It's always cold, but we got sun this time. The cold didn't come until the second series of the season as the Yankees came to town yesterday. But the opening day tradition for the Tigers this year was against the Chicago White Sox. And the Tigers swept the White Sox in fine fashion in the final game with a walk-off, dramatic Spencer Torkelson double that wins the game to sweep the third game of that series. It has been a strange but successful start for the Tigers, who sit in first place at 6-4. They've won 4 in a row, as I noted. Carpenter is bombing the ball. Torkelson looks fantastic. Riley Green is off to what we all hope is an MVP type season. The statistics are there across the board again. Team is getting quality at bats throughout the lineup. Even Javier Baez, who's taken so much heat from the fans since signing that massive contract, has looked great, and he's been willing to play anywhere. Now he's a utility player. He's playing third. He's playing short. He's playing center field for the first time in his career. And looking good, running the bases, hitting the ball, contact, having great at-bats. And up and down the lineup, you're seeing great 8, 9, 10, 11 pitch at-bats from the Detroit Tigers, hanging tough. And since that Dodgers series, where they opened the year losing tough games 3 in a row, they are 6 out of the last 7, your Detroit Tigers. But the interesting part for me is the staff. I don't think you saw it coming where the 5th starter, Casey Mize, who's battling for a job in the rotation, ends up 2-0 with one of the best ERAs in baseball. And Tarek Skubal, the Cy Young Award winner from 2024, is 0-2 and has the worst ERA out of the starters. So we don't even have Skubal going yet. We still have Vierling and Parker Meadows on the bench. They haven't played yet. And the Tigers are in first place, sitting atop the Central Division. So kudos to A.J. Hinch. Again, a manager of the year candidate, seemingly year in and year out for getting the boys of summer in gear, taking the LA Dodgers' best shot in LA, and rolling back to Detroit with a winning record and a team that looks like they have a lot of fun playing the game of baseball. That's what it's got to be in a 162-game season. You got to be having some fun out there, or it's going to be a long path of broken glass if your dugout and your clubhouse are not congealing the way that the Tigers are. So great news there. I'm going to dig into the Final Four. It was one of the greatest endings to a Final Four, to a March Madness season that I have ever been a part of. That game was high-intensity action from the jump, and with the ferocious defense and the length of both of these teams with the shot blocking ability, I was at the edge of my seat from the beginning to the end of the Florida Gators and the Houston Cougars. Congratulations to Todd Golden and the Florida Gators for finding a way to pull it out. They led the game for less than 1 minute of time and found a way to win the game. They found a way to win a game where Walter Clayton Jr., their best player, band leader of Walter and the Claytones, scored 0 points in the first half. He didn't have a basket until there was like 8 minutes left in the game. And the Florida Gators again found a way to win. Now, I know some people are going to say, well, the Houston Cougars found a way to lose because they had a 12-point lead, because they had a lead of half a dozen late in the game, because they missed a couple of key free throws, because they ran a set at the end of the game where they could not get a shot off. But things happen. I feel terrible for Emmanuel Sharp. He's the one who got the pass, squared up and elevated a little too soon. I don't think he saw Clayton coming around the pick to jump out and defend him. So he got caught up in the air, had to drop the ball. There was a scramble for it. Condon, the big fella from Perth, Australia, jumped on the floor, leaping, scrounging, grabs hold of it, and that's ball game. And what a way to end it, right? On a diving ball, just the way that the whole game was played with relentless effort from both of these squads. It was just a fantastic game. The pace, the intensity, the coaching, made some great inbound plays again. Calvin Sampson, I'm heartbroken. The 69-year-old coach would have been the oldest coach to win an NCAA tournament. In exchange for that dramatic potential ending, you got Todd Golden, who is the youngest coach to win at 39 since Jim Valvano did it at 37 years old. You look back at that and you think, Valvano and that NC State team with that amazing comeback and the Phi Slamma Jamma defeat, also defeating Houston in that game. He looked so much older. You just felt like he was older than what Todd Golden looks like. And they had a nice celebration. I thought it got a little bit immature in the celebration. I kind of like the old school coaches, the Dean Smith, the Roy Williams, the Larry Brown, but this is a new generation and they do it differently. And Todd Golden certainly celebrated like a 39-year-old, and that's what the kids want. That's what is going to help him on the recruiting trail, that he can identify with these kids. He certainly motivated them and coached his ass off. I mean, he had just the right defense dialed up in the final moments. He got Walter Clayton open at money time, even though you felt like Walter Clayton was completely disengaged from the plot of this game. It was really Richard who carried them and kept them in the game with multiple three-pointers. And then the big fellas turned in a nice performance for Florida. And it's a 2-point game, right? I mean, could have gone either way right down to the end. So you've got the men's champion Florida Gators, haven't won it since Billy Donovan with his back-to-back, but the championship goes back to Gainesville. And you've got a return to the championship on the women's side. They played down in Tampa. The men finished up at the Alamo Dome in San Antonio. The women played in Tampa, and UConn and Paige Becker brings home the championship, the 12th for Gino Auriemma. The 12th championship. So he goes into the annals with John Wooden from UCLA, the storied Bruins run, as Gino Auriemma gets back to the championship with an average margin of victory in the women's NCAA tournament of 33 points. Gotta be the most dominating run in men's or women's NCAA tournament history ever. Right? They weren't even a number one seed, and they beat every opponent on the way there, an average of 33 points. They crush Dawn Staley and her South Carolina Gamecocks. She was very complimentary, a class act, as always. She said that was a masterful plan. Tough to go down by 30 plus in the championship game. Dan Orlovsky on ESPN and all the UConn faithful, very, very, very happy. Now, they won that on Sunday. So for one night, all the UConn faithful got to celebrate that they had both the men's and the women's championship, because obviously it wasn't until the next night that a new champion was crowned after the back-to-back UConn championships and the Florida Gators defeated the Houston Cougars. So that rounds out the NCAA tournament. And for those of you who were in on the brackets, I love the gambling variety, the survivor pool, where if you're in the fantasy side of it with Walter Clayton, you're going, oh my goodness, I'm looking at a goose egg at halftime. But all of it came down to the finals. A lot of people, I had the finals picked correctly, but so did a zillion other people, with Florida and Houston being number one seeds. So Florida ekes it out. I had Houston, so I took it on the chin a little bit. But with the point spread, very, very close. I saw it at 1.5. I saw it at 2. These odds makers are good. You're not beating Vegas for very long. The other big moment in sports over this past week as an individual effort is Alexander Ovechkin, the young man from Russia who came to the United States and has played his career with the Washington Capitals, 39 years old, in exactly the number of games that Wayne Gretzky played. He breaks Wayne's goal scoring record, not the points record, the goal scoring record. I don't want to take anything away from him. We'll get to that in a minute. But Ovechkin and his 895, is the new goal-scoring champion of the NHL. Kudos to him. He and the NHL did a wonderful job of celebrating this moment. They really set this up. I mean, it was a class act from tip to toe. The NHL and the New York Islanders, who were hosting the Capitals, rolled out the red carpet. Wayne Gretzky got a chance to say his piece, class act. Ovechkin got to have his whole family out there, his mother out there, his wife, his kids. Very sentimental moment with his boys. But what a momentous, nobody thought that Wayne Gretzky's goal scoring record would be broken. And Gretzky's taken a lot of heat. He took a lot of heat the night before for being in the booth with Kash Patel. His Canadian brethren, who are at odds with the United States, his current administration, gave him a ton of heat online. He shrugged it off. He's a class act. He comes out there and he does the right thing and honors Ovechkin's momentous evening. And I'll say this too. Ovechkin, albeit the greatest goal scorer now in the history of the NHL, will never come close to Wayne Gretzky. It will never be in the same sentence as an all-around player as Wayne Gretzky. Remember, Wayne Gretzky was not a goal scorer, and he was the NHL's leading goal scorer of all time. He was a playmaker. He had more than twice as many assists. Ovechkin would have to play an entire additional career on top of the career he just played to have the assists or points that Gretzky has had. He'd have to play another 19 seasons to break Wayne Gretzky's total points record. It's that out of reach for any mortal human being to ever pass Gretzky's greatness as the all-time greatest player in the history of the NHL. So let's also dig into the playoff runs. You've got the National Basketball Association and the NHL, the CHEL and the association, both going into their postseason big moments. So it's not just one shining moment in the NCAA tournament. As the playoffs ramp up and these final slots are on the line, you've got drama at the professional ranks as well. The drama for the Pistons has come down to what slot are they going to end up in? They are 4 games left on the season tally. They have slipped a bit, and the Milwaukee Bucks have passed them for the 5 slot. They're now in the 6 slot, but they're in. They're locked in. So where we want to stay out of all of this play-in madness, and the team that it looks like the Pistons will match up with now, that they are in the 6th slot, is the team that they probably want. And I don't know if Bickerstaff, Coach of the Year candidate, was smart enough to play his lineup and tune himself into this frequency, but it sure seems like he did. He just brought Cade Cunningham back. They haven't rushed Jaden Ivey back. The boot is off of him. We'll see if he can make it back at some point in the playoffs. They haven't rushed Tobias Harris back, which is evident in the depth of the team right now. And there may or may not be a reason behind that. See, the Pistons were stuck in the 5 slot where they would have matched up with the Indiana Pacers, who have beaten them by a significant margin twice this season. By sliding to the 6 spot, they get the New York Knicks. The 3-seeded New York Knicks have fallen to the Pistons twice this year by significant margins. So it's interesting that the Pistons fall into a playoff spot that may be a better fit for them, especially with the leader of the Knicks being day-to-day, banged up this whole second half of the season, Jalen Brunson. So we'll see how that plays out. Cade Cunningham is back. He's getting healthier. Again, we don't know what's going to happen with Ivy, but Schroeder has looked more than decent in filling in. Got to get Tobias Harris back. I know it's only 14 points a game, 6 boards, but having that third scoring option on the floor when you've got lockdown defenders like you're going to face with Cleveland and Boston, both those teams rolling it up as the 1 and 2 seeds in the East, looking as good as anybody anywhere, those are going to be tough outs. Very, very tough outs. So we'll see if losing by design, we'll see if the Bickerstaff 6 seed ends up playing out in the Pistons' favor. I definitely think they can get out of round 1 if it's the Knicks and if Tobias Harris comes back healthy, with or without Ivy. If we end up getting Ivy in this thing, it could get scary. We could make a run. Your Detroit Red Wings, on the other hand, are looking at being 9 years out of the playoffs. They have still a long road to hoe. We shall see. Larkin hasn't looked the same since the Four Nations deal, played great in the international series and just hasn't plugged back into the lineup with the same level of consistency. And it's hard to trust in the Yzer plan at this point. If you look at it, the reconstruction, and we talked a little bit about this, having all of the former Stanley Cup winners, all the great legends of the Red Wings now in the front office, and maybe it's a rose-colored glasses scenario. Maybe they've given them too much rope, and that rope has been used to hang themselves. I've heard all the cliches, but I look, and the St. Louis Blues didn't win the cup that long ago. They fell from grace, looked terrible for a few years, and now they've won 12 games in a row, and they're looking at being a 1 or 2 seed coming out of their conference. Yeah, and it isn't like the Red Wings haven't had individual performances. Lucas Raymond is having his best season. Patrick Kane just became the American with the most 20-goal seasons. He just passed Michigander Mike Modano, who had a cup of coffee in Detroit, played most of his career with Dallas. He just passed him, and Patrick Kane's going to go down as one of, if not the greatest American player He is the greatest power play player right now, even at his age. The Wings have the best power play in the NHL because of Patrick Kane, but they are the worst penalty killing team. And that is what is driving this blue line lack of defender ability when they're down a man, when they're 6-on-5 with the empty net, or when they are in that shorthanded scenario. The Red Wings look at times clueless out there. And it's going to be very difficult here to find a way. There's still a mathematical chance, but it's not looking good for the Wings. I'm going to flip back and look at the NBA and the NHL writ large. Who do you like? On the NBA side, obviously OKC in the West. Little chink in their armor when the Lakers beat them. I know people were hoping that Golden State with this 19-2 with Steph and Jimmy Butler and Draymond, that doesn't look like it's happening. Houston came into Golden State's building and showed why they've got the second best record in the West. Denver, to me, is still the other team just because of Nikola Jokic. Guy can do what he can do, score 60 points and, figure out just any way to beat you with that team. I still would look at OKC and Denver as the two teams to beat coming out of the West. And I still think Cleveland and Boston are better than both of them. So I still think whoever comes out of the East, I'm going to pick Cleveland. I think it's going to be a Cleveland OKC finals. And I'm going to pick the Cleveland Cavaliers to win that in 7 games. I think it's going to go right down to it. I think it's going to be a fantastic NBA final. I also think Cleveland's going to have to go through the buzzsaw of Boston. I think that's going to go 7 games. Hopefully they keep home field advantage, and that 7th game is in Cleveland, because I'll tell you right now, whoever has that home court advantage between Boston and Cleveland is going to end up playing OKC in the finals. On the NHL side of this, the Florida Panthers just look like they've got this thing tuned up incredibly well with Brad Marchand coming over. The Rat. We'll see who else can make a run. Obviously, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the long since 1967, the drought of so many decades. The Leafs fans are hoping that they can be the representative from the East. I like the Colorado Avalanche. I know there are better teams. I know Winnipeg has been the most complete. I know Golden Knights from Las Vegas have a great playoff-ready squad, but my money is going on an Avalanche Florida final. So that's the NHL picks, and I'm sticking to it. I'm going to go into one more little apology, a little mea culpa here. I have been really hard on the referees. In basketball in particular. We're always hard on football referees because football's the sport where both me and my hosts and my other guests have the most experience on the football field. But the basketball refereeing in the national championship game, that first half, they just stayed out of the way. And it was beautiful to watch. Really aggressive, intense, defense-leading basketball in that NCAA finals. First half of the second half, they got the whistles out in a big way, and it was detrimental to the game. I do think that they let Florida back in the game, and I know that the technical foul and some of the other stuff might have been a little bit of rabbit ears, might have been overly sensitive. Hey, the big fella, Chinaloo, spiking the ball off the floor, you can't do that. That's a worthy technical. But then to come back and call 3 fouls in 9 seconds on Houston, put Tugler and Francis in foul trouble for Houston, I think they let Florida back in the game. Now, Florida took, and obviously Houston could have continued to defend, use all 5 fouls. Tugler did use all 5 of his fouls. But, there were moments, and Houston had their opportunities. So I'm not blaming, and the referees actually stayed out of that game more than they had in other games, and it was a very enjoyable NCAA championship game. The referees in the NBA need to figure it out. And so does the front office. DiVincenzo getting a 1-game suspension after tackling Ron Holland and taking the fray into the crowd, to me, is laughable. Ja Morant laughing at Adam Silver is also not a good look for me with the number of issues that he has had. If you're going to set a tone and you want the credibility of the league to be emblematic of the priorities, of the decorum that you're trying to represent to young fans in particular, you got to keep people held to a certain standard. And then the game itself. I mean, the inconsistency, the calls that are not called and the calls that are called. It just seems like it's celebrity driven. You watch who gets the calls. You watch who doesn't get the calls. The young no-name guys can get hammered all the way to the hoop, and there's nothing. And the franchise, star-studded names get the ticky-tack calls, and they cry and they whine, and then they get a call in the very next play. It's just a very reactive group of NBA officials, and I think they got to get it buttoned up because it's hurting the game. It really hurts the quality of the watch. That's my take on that. Tiger baseball. I'm going to come all the way back around just to give you the run of the major leagues. The Yankees also are 6-4. Tigers will try to break that tie with them today, but they're in the East. The Tigers, they're the leader in the East. The Tigers lead the Central, and the Rangers with 8 wins lead the West. That's the stand right now. The big Dodger push, where they came flying out of the blocks, has come back down to earth. They have 9 wins, but they are in 3rd place right now because the San Francisco Giants and the Padres are 9-2 and 8-2. Who would have thunk it that the National League West is on fire? The Cubs have 8 wins, the Phillies and the Mets have 7. That rounds out the East and the Central. So Major League Baseball is off in full swing. All the teams have had their opening days now. We are now into the 2nd or 3rd series on the road or at home for most of the teams. They're starting to settle in, but it is a long road in Major League Baseball. And we will be back before the Major League season hits its playoff run. We will be back at you in June and July with more GOATQuest episodes. So I don't have to give you my picks yet. I can wait till after the All-Star break to see how these teams hash out and settle in. So we have to round this thing out with a GOAT list. And the GOAT lists, plural today, are going to be in tune with these playoff hunts. I mentioned that the association and the Chell are heading to the playoff season, and both of the local teams here in Detroit are amongst those fighting for playoff position. So those are the 2 lists today. The greatest of all time amongst the Detroit Red Wings and the Detroit Pistons. The Red Wings will go first with. I'm going to go bottom up, and I'm going to start with the goaltender. I know it's a very valuable position. Some people would say you need to finish with the goaltender. But Terry Sawchuk is the greatest goaltender in Red Wings history. We've talked about this. I did a little mini featurette on Sawchuk's phenomenal career. Won everything, won many cups, won MVPs, won Stanley Cup championships and championship MVPs, had the longest winning streak, just a star-studded career for Terry Sawchuk, not just the face that everybody sees with the stitches that has become an infamous photo in black and white that you can look up online. But Terry Sawchuk, greatest goaltender of all time, he comes in at the bottom of my top 5 Red Wings of all time. I'm just giving you the top 5. I'll give you some honorable mentions, don't worry. But I'm just giving you the top 5 right now. At number 4, I'm going to go with the only modern player on the list. That's Pavel Datsyuk, a recent Hall of Famer. And I give you Pavel Datsyuk as number 4 because Pavel Datsyuk was the greatest two-way forward, in my opinion, that I've ever seen. The defensive capabilities, the ability to pick the pocket, and then turn around and be one of the best puck handlers in the history of the game on the other side of the ice, a points machine, and just a winner. Just does whatever it took to win. All the little things, all the things that don't show up on the scorebook. Pavel Datsyuk and that 2002 Stanley Cup championship team in Detroit, just a thing of beauty. So congratulations to him for his recent induction into the Hall of Fame. Number 3, so tough on this one, Nicholas Lidstrom. He's almost number 2. I want to say that he's number 2, but I do think he could be the best defenseman, the best defensive defenseman of all time. Bobby Orr is the best defenseman of all time. Don't let anybody make any other argument. But Nicholas Lidstrom could be the best pure defensive stalwart. Another 2002 Cup champion. He won Cups before that because he played such a long and illustrious career. He's got a street named after him over in Novi, Michigan. Nicholas Lidstrom, unforgettable lockdown defender, taking great centermen completely off their game on a regular basis, which leaves us with the obvious number 2 and number 1. Anybody who knows the Detroit Red Wings should know who these two are. One of them is currently leading the club in the front office, Stevie Y, the captain, Steve Yzerman, the youngest captain at 19 years old, multiple Stanley Cups, playoff leader in points and assists, made the Stanley Cup playoffs the entirety of his career. After his first couple of seasons, he goes to the playoffs a record 20-something times. Ridiculous numbers of success for Steve Yzerman. And then Gordie Howe is your number 1. Above Mount Rushmore, right up there in the Mount Rushmore of the history of the game. The legend, games played, points, goals. Gordie Howe leads in everything. He actually has a bridge named after him that's almost done. They're about to put the last pieces in place for the Gordie Howe Bridge. It'll be the most traversed crossing between the two great nations of the United States and Canada. But it isn't just that. Gordie Howe has his own hat trick, his own scoring category. The Gordie Howe hat trick is when you score a goal, get an assist, and win a fight. Nobody has that. You know, I know Wayne Gretzky is the first guy to take up office behind the net, and Bobby Orr was the first defenseman to lead rushes offensively, and I'm sure that's not true. Gordie Howe, though, does have his own hat trick. He could defend his fellow teammates. He created ice for everyone else because of his presence. He could be a playmaker. He could be a goal scorer. He could rough it up. He could defend. He played both ends. So Gordie Howe, in all of his greatness, I had a chance to meet him. I had a chance to shovel his walkway. I had a chance to chew the fat and share a cup of tea with him. And what a phenomenal guy. Amazing, amazing Detroit icon and hockey icon, period. Mr. Gordie Howe. Mr. Hockey. Who's the honorable mention? Well, I could have mentioned his line mates, Ted Lindsay and Sid Abel, the production line. His other line mates, the other production line, Alex Delvecchio, who played his entire 24 seasons. Alex Delvecchio played 24 years in Detroit. Frank Mahovlich was the other member of that second production line with Gordie Howe at the center position. Obviously, you know, teammates of Pavel Datsyuk and Nicholas Lidstrom throughout their careers were Henrik Zetterberg and Sergei Fedorov. Zetterberg and Fedorov, both on that 2002 Stanley Cup winning team, just absolutely fantastic players. And Vladimir Konstantinov, his career cut way too short. Slava Fetisov, if he wouldn't have had to play most of his career in Russia, if he was an NHL player, what would he have been on defense? If Vlad Konstantinov hadn't got in the terrible accident, what would he have accomplished as a defenseman in the NHL? Chris Chelios, he's a Blackhawk, played most of his career in Chicago, jersey retired in both arenas, great Red Wing when he played here for us. So those are my list of wings. I told you I would also give you the Pistons. I'm going to start off the Pistons, greatest of all time list, with the coaches. I'm going to separate the coaches from the list because the Pistons have had two of the most dynamic and charismatic coaches from a broadcasting standpoint. You know, the time that I spent in Detroit, I got a chance to see both of these guys up close. Chuck Daly, who has a Lifetime Achievement Award named after him, Hall of Fame twice, once for his coaching of the Detroit Pistons and once for his coaching of the Dream Team, the greatest team that has ever taken the court, the Olympic gold medal championship team. Chuck Daly led the Bad Boys, but he really transformed basketball in Detroit from utter basement dwelling to a personality, to an iconic team, to back-to-back championships, and really huge influence over the transition from the Magic Larry Bird era to the Michael Jordan era. Everybody forgets that in between, the Bad Boys were the dominant team. Larry Brown is the second coach that has won relatively recent championships. I know it's well over 20 years now. But that 2004 championship that the Pistons won was led by a 5'9" kid from Brooklyn. Larry Brown, one of the funniest, most quick-witted guys you could ever ask to meet, was a winner his whole life. He won the Maccabi games. Jewish tough kid from Brooklyn won the Maccabi games when in the early 1960s. He goes to North Carolina. They win the ACC in 63. Obviously a great point guard at North Carolina. He decides to go to the ABA. He was drafted, I think, in the 6th or 7th round in the NBA, but he decides to go to the ABA, where he wins a championship as a point guard. This was not a B league, right? I mean, this was like an A- league at that time. A lot of stars, but he played for the Oakland Oaks. You won't hear that one on very many podcasts. And won the 1969 ABA championship as a player. As an assistant coach, he coached with Dean Smith, his alma mater at North Carolina, and then went and coached with John Wooden, the winningest coach in the history of basketball. John Wooden, famously, I think I've told the story where he talked about when Wilt Chamberlain beat the Lakers with his UCLA freshman team. Wilt at center. He beat the Lakers and Magic Johnson in 81 in a pickup game to 10, and nobody got a shot off in the paint. Wilt Chamberlain blocked every shot that went into the paint in a 10-point pickup game. But he has tons of those stories. Larry Brown is a great storyteller because of his accomplishments. After he coached with those two winningest coaches ever, he went himself and won the national championship at Kansas in 1988. He won the NBA title, as I said, with Detroit in 2004. He also got another gold. He won the gold medal himself as a player in 1964 and then won it as an assistant coach in 2000 in Sydney. So I don't think you're going to find very many coaches who have the resume of consistent winning and being around winners than Larry Brown. Which leads me to the players. The greatest Detroit Pistons of all time. Well, if you go backwards, I'm going to start with a Detroit Catholic Leaguer at the bottom of the top 5. I think Dave DeBusschere played at Austin Prep. I will check on that. But Dave DeBusschere, who was a fierce defender at the small forward position, played most of his career with the Pistons, but the best of his career with the New York Knicks. He won his championship with the New York Knicks. A lot of people think of him as a New York Knick. He died too soon. But DeBusschere, a Detroit kid, grew up in Detroit, played for the Pistons, Hall of Fame career, dynamite, legendary basketball player, soup to nuts in Detroit. My next one up that list from 5 is also an old-timer. Another guy who I've got to meet and is a delightful man on several occasions, a former mayor of the city of Detroit, the second player taken in the draft from Syracuse, Dave Bing, who was a fellow co-founder of the Pro-Am League at St. Cecilia with Sam Washington Sr. Dave Bing is my number 4 all-time Piston. Love Dave Bing, great scorer, ball handler, point guard, do-it-all guard. Played with Bob Lanier, definitely a honorable mention on the Piston list, but never could get into a playoff run. So that's what leaves him down at 4. My top 3 are all champions. All 3 guys won championships. My number 3, and this was another one that was very, very tough for me, is Ben Wallace. I do believe that Ben Wallace is on the mantle of the greatest defensive players in NBA history. I think he's on Mount Rushmore. I think he's top 5 all-time defensive players in the history of the association. Of course, he won the 2004 championship that I mentioned with Larry Brown. And my number 2 is also a defensive player. Dennis Rodman, the Hall of Famer. And I know people are going, what do you mean? I thought you were going to say Joe Dumars with his great defense. I thought you were going to maybe say Rasheed Wallace or that Bob Lanier. No, I did not think that. I did not. My difficulty was only between Wallace and Rodman. Why did I go with Rodman over Ben Wallace? Dennis Rodman's second half of his career, where he remained outstanding with the Spurs and then went on the run of championships in Michael Jordan's second act with Chicago, is what tips the hand for me on the all-time list. He is arguably the greatest rebounder of all time, especially if you just isolate it as a singular statistic. He's the most difficult player to play against in possibly the history of the game. And we talk about this in hockey all the time. How difficult are you to play against, right? The defensive backs are the same way. How annoying, how pesky, how sticky are you? And that was Dennis Rodman. He was the most difficult player to play against. He was one of the most flamboyant characters in the history of the league. An absolutely ferocious defender and the greatest rebounder that I've ever seen. Number 2 Piston of all time. And that leaves number 1, Isaiah Thomas. Oh, Isaiah. I don't think there's any doubt in this one. He takes the Pistons when he arrives after winning the national championship with Bobby Knight at Indiana within 5 or 6 years. And he went through some dark days, the Kent Benson, Kelly Tripucka days in Detroit. He went through some very dark days, and they remade that franchise. I saw Bill Simmons, and he just does such phenomenal work. But I saw his Celtics documentary series, watched a couple episodes of it last night, and they're talking about the Pistons. And obviously the Pistons are disliked, and that's completely legitimate. They played a brand of basketball that a lot of people didn't appreciate. Purists definitely didn't appreciate. But they called him the crime boss. Like it was Isaiah Thomas's plot behind the scenes that made the Bad Boys what they were. And I never thought of it that way. But I think there's some truth to it. I do think that he was the Don. That little 6'1" kid from Chicago was kind of the behind the scenes sentiment behind that anger and that bitterness that they played with. They were disrespected. I mean, the whole city of Detroit, let's face it, from Donald Trump's disrespect for Detroit, telling people that, you know, don't let the whole world become like Detroit. Everybody wants to kick Detroit. So the way that the Pistons played, the level of animosity that they brought to the hardwood against their opponents is completely understandable. It was the context of the times, and it was the context of the city. So I appreciated Isaiah Thomas's ring leadership with those Bad Boys teams. And, you know, people criticize him for getting Adrian Dantley out of town and bringing Mark Aguirre in. He knew what he thought we needed to win. And if there was a little weakness, a little softness that you could poke at in a situation, and I'm not calling Adrian Dantley soft. I mean, guy's a Hall of Famer. But Isaiah Thomas put the recipe together. He made one of the worst inbound passes in the history of basketball allowing Larry Bird to throw the ball to Dennis Johnson to win that 87 NBA Eastern Conference Finals. And then he came back and snatched it right back. And then he came back and he won 2 championships in a row. And he swept the Lakers. So Isaiah Thomas goes down in history. He should have been on the Dream Team. Michael Jordan's little vindictiveness aside, Isaiah Thomas is one of the top 3, maybe top 4 point guards in the history of basketball. And he is your greatest Piston of all time. So those are my GOAT lists. We are going to miss you as these NBA and NHL seasons wrap up. The Stanley Cup will be awarded while we're on hiatus. The NBA championship will be awarded. We'll probably, I think, almost get to the All-Star break in the epically, ridiculously long Major League Baseball season. But we will be back. We will have one more finale episode where we talk in depth about the Detroit Tigers and see where we stand there. We will also tee up the NFL draft in the finale episode. But we're coming to the end, and the Beer Man will be back. He can't stay in Los Angeles forever. He can run, but he cannot hide. We will catch him. It's going to be an epic final episode. Stay tuned. Follow us on Spotify and Apple and YouTube if you actually want to take a look at what we're doing here in the studio. It's an exciting time in sports. We're going to have it teed up and lined up for you. You can see all the activity on the socials. But more importantly, since this is about you, make sure that you are out there in the world becoming the GOAT at whatever it is that you're doing today.